One of the most popular American poets since 1914 was Robert Frost. He won 4 Pulitzer Prizes and received a Congressional Gold Medal from President Kennedy for his poetic achievements. Frost, the wise farmer turned poet, could in a few lines invite us into his New England world.
Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. He only says good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows, but here there are no cows? Before I build a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down.
For Frost, however, fame came slowly. It was only after years of struggling that he found his voice and his audience. His farm in Derry, New Hampshire, provided the inspiration and material for his first 2 poetry collections, and is now a museum in honor of his humble roots. While Frost will always be associated with New England, he was, however, born and raised out west.
Listening to conversation. Frost is born in San Francisco, and he comes here when he is 10 years old. And I think Louis Untermeyer said something about Frost. Said Frost was like an alien dropped into a foreign world, and he was in amazement for the rest of his life. and San Francisco at the particular time he was born, 1874, was a pretty wild place. And he was a city boy, and then to come here to New England and to be involved with the kind of strictness of his father's family, I think part of the reason his dad...
During the early years of Frost's marriage, he struggled to provide for his family. He was in poor health, he just lost his first child, and he couldn't find a publisher for his poetry. His wife Eleanor convinced his father, without Frost's knowledge, to buy them the chicken farm in Derry.
To buy the farm, and then goes to Carl Burrell and says, would you manage the place, because these people do not know how to farm. Eleanor was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Her dad was a Universalist minister. She lived in the city. I mean, Lawrence was an industrial town. Rob had been born in San Francisco and was a city boy.
In spite of how it may appear in his poetry, Frost struggled to keep his farm running and mystify the locals. His ineptitude particularly became evident after the farm manager left.
When Carl Burrell leaves, after about 2 years, Rob tries to get the cow on his schedule, which is 12 noon and 12 midnight. The cow does not comply and goes dry. You can just see the farmers around it just shaking their head.
Milking cows at noon was not the only evidence of Frost's ineptitude. He valued his children's education far more than conventional farming wisdom.
He decided he wanted to homeschool his children. He and Leslie, or Eleanor, decided they wanted to homeschool the children. And so in January he said, I want my children to understand what it's like to live in a city. So he took them all to New York for a month. Again, you could hear them. You could just see the farmers of Derry going, there he goes, he's leaving his farm. He's leaving his animals to go, but he did.
While Frost's neighbors may not have thought much of him, they provided Frost with much insight into human nature.
This was a really fun thing. This was a party line at that time, so there'd be 4 farms on it, Barry and Gway and Frost and Webster, and he'd be standing here listening to other people talking on the party line, and his kids would say, Pa, what are you doing? He'd say, I'm doing my research.
Many of Frost's most beloved poems were inspired by his 9 years in Derry, including The Pasture, Mending Wall, West Running Brook, After Apple Picking, and Home Burial. The impetus for The Death of the Hired Man occurred in the downstairs bedroom and involved the farm manager's grandfather, John Eastman.
John Eastman is going to pass on in this room, and we believe that his passing was the inspiration for his longer poem, Death of a Hired Man. And John Eastman comes here because he needs a home. And in the poem, he says, home is the place that when you have to go there, they have to take you in. So.
Mary sat musing on the lamp flame at the table, waiting for Warren. When she heard his step, she ran on tiptoe down the darkened passage to meet him in the doorway with the news and put him on his guard. Silas is back. He's come to help you ditch the meadow. Warren returned. Too soon, it seemed to her. Slipped to her side, caught up her hand, and waited. Warren, she questioned. Dead was all he answered.
Struggling to provide for his family, Frost turned to teaching part-time in 1906 and full-time in 1909. Not being able to write much while teaching, Frost moved his family to England in 1912, living off of an inheritance from his father and the proceeds from selling the farm. Frost published his first book of poetry, A Boy's Will, a month after his arrival in England, and his second book, North of Boston, 6 months later. Returning to America in 1915 because of World War I, Frost immediately found an American publisher for his 2 books. Recognition and popularity came quickly, and Frost was on his way to becoming the most beloved modern American poet. If it had not been for his experiences in Derry farming, Frost may never have seen the popularity that he did. Readers have come to love Frost's persona of the wise countryman living close to nature.